what exactly will this Disinformation Governance Board do? Will it monitor American citizens?
Dan, I'm very pleased to do so. It's clear. I mean, those criticisms are precisely the opposite of what this small working group within the Department of Homeland Security will do. And I think we probably could have done a better job of communicating what it does and does not do.
So from Mayorkas's perspective, the Misinformation Board has created misinformation about the Misinformation Board's scope and purpose. Great. I feel better already, don't you?
Disinformation that creates a threat to the security of the homeland is our responsibility to address. And this department has been addressing it for years, throughout the years of the prior administration, and an ongoing basis. Disinformation from Russia,
right.
China,
We know
Iran.
the problems, but it's still not clear to me how this governance board will act. What will it do?
Yeah, kudos to Dana Bash, by the way, for actually grilling Mayorkas here. You can watch the rest of the interview if you like, but at no point does he explain how the board will avoid committing the serious errors that have characterized all previous attempts to prohibit misinformation. The most comforting thing he said was that the board won't have much actual power, since it's only acting in an advisory role, supposedly. Mayorkas also expressed full confidence in Jankowicz, the head of the board. It turns out, however, she appears to have suspected that the Hunter Biden story was Russian-backed misinformation. She has lots of old tweets to that effect. Now, she is the author of the recent book, How to Be a Woman Online, Surviving Abuse and Harassment, and How to Fight Back. So I read just this section of it that was published at Wired, in which she essentially suggests that online harassment, which is a real problem to be sure, is something endured almost exclusively by women. Seems like the book's entire framing, to be frank. It's a false framing, though, as my friend, the journalist Kathy Young, wrote in a 2020 feature for Reason magazine. Studies consistently show fewer women than men actually say they experience internet harassment of every kind, except for sexual harassment. Counterintuitively, even so-called revenge porn, non-consensual exposure of intimate images may happen to men more often, according to the 2017 Pew survey that Kathy Young cites. And while women in the survey were considerably more likely than men to rate their online harassment experiences as extremely or very upsetting, they were no more likely to report negative consequences ranging from mental and emotional stress to problems at work or school, end quote. So it is a real problem, but there's a kind of framing of it that some feminist progressive writers, like apparently this new head of the Disinformation Board, put a spin on it that it's only about harassment toward women. Now, in addition to being supposedly a misinformation expert, Jankowicz is quite a talented singer, appears to enjoy combining these two talents, so let's watch this.
Information laundering is really quite ferocious. It's when a huckster takes some lies and makes them sound precocious by saying them in Congress or a mainstream outlet. So disinformation's origins are slightly less atrocious. It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. When Rudy Giuliani shared bad intel from Ukraine, or when TikTok influencers say COVID can cause pain. They're laundering disinfo and we really should take note and not support their lies with our wallet, voice, or vote. Oh!
Is this the last thing we will hear before we're sent to re-education camps? Or maybe they play that at the re-education camp. Do they just blare it while you're in your cell so that you're ready for the brainwashing?
Robbie, I feel so bad.
I'm sorry, I hate show tunes. I just hate them, but...
All right, we had a recent conversation where it was revealed that you're a big Chitty Chitty Bang Bang fan, so let's not overstate
all right, fair. Wow, that was off the record, okay?
But look, I have a soft spot in my heart for theater kids, but they need to know the time and the place. You have to know if you TikTok it, you will get dragged by the internet. She's made her bed, she's sleeping in it.
Yeah.
Obviously, to your point, the bigger issue here, apart from her cringe, is that the government is establishing an agency to do something that the government has never demonstrated an ability to do, not just in general history, but in the very, very recent past. And the areas where they are specifically saying they want to focus, Russia, misinformation, all of that stuff, is exactly where they have failed so recently.
100%.
So they just have to be able to articulate what the new standard is going to be. And if this were an effort to say, fund independent media, so there can be independent fact checking, I think a lot of people would be more excited about that kind of an intervention. People would be excited. This is not it. This is not it. Freedom-loving Americans, hear me out. I am begging you to consider that locking people up for saying and doing things you disagree with outside of a criminal context is not the best way to demonstrate how much you appreciate bedrock American values like due process, the First Amendment, and freedom. Some of the responses to the leak literally sound like an Onion article. SCOTUS rules that citizens don't have a right to privacy. Urge prosecution of colleagues for violating their right to privacy. Surely you can see the inconsistency here. I'm not here to tell anyone not to be upset about the leak. It's a natural response depending on your politics and what you think the motive of the leaker was. But consider resisting the march toward authoritarianism as you protest this outcome. Incarceration is a very blunt tool, and I suggest we use it sparingly. So, Robbie?
No disagreement. I mean, what do you want to say? I agree. Yeah, I said it earlier. I think it's crazy. And honestly, a lot of the people, well, I don't know. I think some of the people calling for lock them up, this is like a knee-jerk response to frustration that this happened. And if they probably thought about it a little bit longer, would realize that, no, that doesn't make any sense.
I mean, what do you think that there's so many high-profile people? The idea that Jeanine Pirro, who has a law background, hops on TV and starts wildly pontificating. I'm sure we can dig up a law somewhere to get this person in jail. I mean, that is kind of scary.
Yeah. It's dumb. I mean, what do you want to say? Yeah, I agree. I don't know that. But I will say, look, the suffering of the professional consequences being suffered for this, I think, are perfectly legitimate. And I think it's extraordinarily likely in this case that if the person is identified and it turns out that they are that the most straightforward explanation is the correct one, this is a progressive person who wants to defend abortion rights, wants to defend Roe, and thought that leaking the decision, to the extent it could possibly cause someone like a Kavanaugh to reconsider, or it could start preparing the outrage. And maybe there's nothing that can be done about that, but I think that's the most likely explanation for this person's actions. And I think in that case, this person will suffer the narrow professional consequence of no longer being a clerk for the Supreme Court or any other Republican judge. Not that they are a clerk currently for a Republican judge, that consequence, but they will things will get better for their career. They will become a hero to progressives. They'll be able to write their own ticket. They will be lionized and celebrated the way the so-called Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen was when she came out with that information about Instagram.
Where is she
and
now?
it was I don't know, on some private eye. Wasn't she had a Bitcoin fortune?
I have no idea. But look, I will say that is perfectly possible. And I don't know what this person, whoever they are, what their long-term goals were. If their goals were to stay in the corporate sphere, it's not like law firms, as much as they might, the right might want to characterize them this way. They're not bastions of progressivism. They're just not. They're very conservative institutions. I worked at a law firm that was run by 2 out of 3 Republican partners. It was a conservative environment, and they would not look at someone who does something like this kindly.
What's most concerning to me is the amount of influence Bill Gates has over global health. The New York Times has reported how experts inside the public health and medical sector may disagree with Bill Gates on a variety of things, but because of his massive donations to nearly every influential health organization, you've got him at Johns Hopkins, Imperial College of London, Mayo Clinic, he's everywhere. They fear that they would lose their jobs or their entity would lose its funding. They've actually dubbed it the Bill Chill. So he's insanely influential. And I also think it's mind-boggling with that influence that Bill Gates would look at the lockdowns and the mandates and think that this worked out so well, he now wants to double down on it.
It's terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. The lesson I took from this pandemic is we can never do this again. We can never again delegate so much authority to close down society, to mass society, to forcibly vaccinate society, to totally unaccountable, and even if they are theoretically accountable, they don't behave as if they're accountable, elite policymakers, epidemiologists, health officials, and then people like Bill Gates who just have a lot of money, don't have any actual formal role in the health process, but just by virtue of having bought their way into it. The kinds of people who clearly fetishize the level of authoritarian control that, for instance, a country like China has to pursue a zero COVID strategy forever, no matter how badly the people suffer.
Yeah, look, I'm very sympathetic and completely agree that Bill Gates' influence in this sector is not based on merit and is unproductive and seems like, in this context, the clip you showed, a weird money grab to sell his book, which I feel like that is not something that he needs to do. To get more book royalties as one of the richest men on the planet. But I am a little concerned that some of the mistakes that have been made in the context of this pandemic, which I roundly agree with are a problem, are a reason not to try to make the system better for the next time. I think a world where we avoided some of the supply chain issues when it came to getting protective gear, when it came to getting masks. A lot of the mask confusion and the misrepresentations about the efficacy of masks was about them wanting to save, PPE for nurses and doctors. That is obviously wrong, and they should not have done that. But a plan that starts to say, oh, we can make these kinds of materials at home. We have stockpiles. We have the kind of ventilator machines and the intubation machines. We have staff up doctors and have more hospital beds. The idea that we would be more ready next time for a pandemic that we should all remember has killed coming up on 1 million Americans, I don't think is a bad thing. And I would just push back a little against the idea that any plan to improve upon the process, just because it is being overseen by the government or in relationship to the government because of its ability to manage that kind of broad scale action, is necessarily bad.